Hello everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to Whimsical and Interesting Musings, or WHIMs. And today I wanted to talk to you about a particular Christmas episode of one of my favourite horror comedy anthology shows, Inside Number 9. And this episode I'm going to be focusing on The Devil of Christmas. And initially, when I was going to decide to record an episode today, I was going to do an episode on the 2015 film Krampus, but because we have the new Inside Number 9 Christmas special, The Bones of St. Nicholas, coming out on the 22nd of December, I thought, why don't we tackle the Devil of Christmas first, and then somewhere, maybe tomorrow perhaps, or somewhere along the line, I'll talk about, Krampus. And it's actually really interesting because as much as Krampus came first in regards to television in terms of story film adaptations, Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith actually came across the idea of wanting to tell a story of Krampus first. And for the longest time, this particular episode was under production before Christmas, but it was released like The Bones of St. Nicholas. It was kind of released in the build-up to Christmas, rather than, say, for example, something like Love's Great Adventure or The 12 Days of Christine, where they were released on different dates, but they were mostly centered around the theme of Christmas. Obviously, The 12 Days of Christine is obviously a bit of a pun title on The 12 Days of Christmas, but for the most part, they're not really Christmas-themed episodes. They just happen to take place around the holiday. But with The Devil of Christmas, it has quite a very big emphasis on the word Christmas, including the title. But this particular episode is probably one of my favourites because it really does harken back to a very specific time where acting could be very cheesy in made-for-TV dramas, and things can go horribly wrong, especially if it's a particular show that has a particularly tight filming schedule, or it's a soap opera or anything like that. So this episode is actually really fun to watch from that perspective. Well, the basic premise of The Devil of Christmas is it's basically a story within a story. The first story that we're engaged in is the story of this family who is played by Steve Pemberton, Jessica Raines, Rula Lenski, and their son, George. I've forgotten the actor's name, but they basically are taking a Christmas holiday in the mountains of Austria, and it's during the Christmas break, so there's a heavy snowstorm, and they decide to basically, take holiday up in this cabin. But little do they realise that this cabin has quite a bizarre and very peculiar folk legend, which is that of the Krampus, which is a sort of ancient deity, demonic creature who, like Santa Claus, he visits you on Christmas Eve, but instead of rewarding you, he ends up, not just leaving a lump of coal in your stocking, let's just say that. He basically punishes naughty children while Santa rewards the good. And this idea is pretty damn amazing. I mean, I first heard about the tale of Krampus in my German class at school. So when I found out that they were doing a film version of the character of Krampus, I was very excited because, of course, I learned about him through my German class during one Christmas, and I was actually really happy to see that they finally did a horror movie version. But I'm actually kind of sad that that Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith had their episode released after the success of the 2015 Krampus film, because I think they did a very good job. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that the 2015 Krampus exists, because that's literally become my annual Christmas viewing now. Whenever I watch it, whenever it's on Netflix or on Amazon Prime, I'll happily just switch it on during Christmas time, because it gives me that Christmassy feel, especially that feeling of being isolated, and of course you hear the cold, and you kind of hear the rustling of the snow and the branches in the trees and all these other things. So it's a very nice film to watch during Christmas time. But I'm getting sidetracked. I need to get back to the episode. So the episode basically follows this family: Julian, Kathy, and George. And Julian's mother, played by Rula Lenska. And Rula Lenska was actually a veteran of many TV shows during the 70s, and she's mostly well known for playing Audrey's friend in Coronation Street, Audrey Platt, and she's a great actress. She kind of basically plays this character who's kind of a friend, but kind of not a friend. She's kind of like Joan Collins in Dynasty, where she's not quite, this terrible person, but she's not quite good either. She has that kind of feel to her character in Coronation Street. But she plays the mother-in-law, and she plays, if you look at it from the point of view of Kathy, she's the mother-in-law from hell, because she doesn't approve of her son Julian marrying a much younger girl, and she kind of feels very isolated. She basically has to play the surrogate mum to George, like the stepmom to George, and she feels very paranoid. And when she hears the story of Krampus, she feels very kind of, unsettled. She feels very protective of George, but then she's also very worried for her own safety, and she's also worried, as we find out, for the safety of her own child, because it turns out that she's pregnant. And that also adds a certain layer of of darkness to the entire episode. But what's very interesting is, you think at first you're going to watch it played completely straight, where you're watching this story about this family, one of whom feels like a bit of an outsider and doesn't really feel like they fit in, and they're trying to basically, fill this hole, this empty space that this other person who sadly died has left behind. So you're basically trying to fill this role, but then of course you're trying to be your own person and trying to, I think it's called imposter syndrome, where you feel like you're trying to meet the standards of what other people have made for you, kind of thing, but then you know in your own heart that you'll never be the same towards the same standards as that one person. So that's actually really a relatable thing. But what really is interesting about this entire episode is you think you're watching this drama completely straight, and it just has this very wonderful, and what's very interesting to know is it's done in this very kind of 70s style, very much 70s style lens and this 70s style look. I mean, if you actually watch the episode, it does actually look like something that would be filmed in the 70s, like something along the lines of Armchair Thriller or Tales of the Unexpected. Those very classical yet very campy type suspense stories. And it definitely gets that down to the T. They literally went through painstaking detail to make sure every aspect of the era was very well replicated in this episode. They even got the old cameras, the old 70s cameras, out of storage in the BBC so that they could actually film this episode. And it really is an incredible effort on the part of Adam Tandy and all the production, and of course Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith's script. But what's really great is how it looks. It actually looks like something that would be shown in the 70s. And it really is well done. It's very well written. It has a very incredible sense of self-awareness. Because there's a lot of moments during this episode where characters would deliberately flub lines and they'd have to repeat them, or you'd just see a boom mic within the corner of a shot. Like, you could just look off the corner of the screen and you'd just see a little boom mic hover over it. And they would just leave it in. They wouldn't, say cut and say we've got to do it again. They'd just leave it in. They'd leave stuff like that in just because they thought they could get away with it. And it's a really great, episode just for the looking at all those different details, seeing how the makeup looks on the characters' faces so that it's photographed well with the classical 70s cameras. All this stuff feels like it's a wonderful love letter to those 70s type mini-serials like Tales from the Unexpected and Armchair Thriller and all these other things. But what's really great about this this particular episode is it's not just the meta aspect, I suppose you'd call it the meta aspect of this episode, where it's constantly referring back to itself. It's constantly making fun of this particular style and this particular way of telling a story. They even put a further signature on it by having Derek Jacobi be the director who's doing what appears to be at first a director's commentary of the episode of this particular film that he's made, and it gives you the impression that this is a director's commentary on the DVD, and this is sort of like a classic made for TV 70s movie. And at first it kind of has all the same beats as something along the lines of Rosemary's Baby or Don't Look Now or The Stepford Wives. The idea of, this woman being put into this environment where she doesn't feel comfortable, she doesn't feel part of the family, she doesn't feel like she belongs, but she constantly is being, subjected to all kinds of torture, all sorts of psychological manipulation and all sorts of other things. And it's very well done. It really kind of gives you that sense of this is a classical 70s thriller, in the sense that this character just doesn't know whether what she's seeing is in fact real, or whether it's the work of some supernatural being, or whether someone else is actually messing with their head psychologically. There's so many things in this that I thought were very well done from a filmmaking standpoint in the story itself, but then it would kind of be peppered with these interesting comments that the director would make. And first of all, it's very funny, like he'd make reference to the fact that Rulenska, snubbed her line there, and she kind of tried to cover herself by, repeating it again or doing it in a different way, and she goes, "Oh, saved yourself there," kind of thing. And it's very well done, because it really does, you can really tell that the people who made this really did their best to really kind of capture that feel of a commentary, because from what I hear of the production, they actually did all this stuff live, to the point where they literally had Derek Jacobi record his lines in a booth, and they literally tried to match the characters' performances perfectly so that it measured up to the comments that Derek Jacobi made in the recording. So there was that sense of, it's almost like when directors play music on the set of films to really give you a sense of atmosphere and a sense of mood with everything. It kind of gives you that feel to it. Like, say, for example, in the film Blue Velvet, and Angelo Badalamenti did the music for Blue Velvet, and during the scene where Jeffrey Beaumont and Sandy Williams, played by Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern, they actually played Angelo Badalamenti's music on camera on the set, so that they could actually really get the mood and the atmosphere right, so that the actors could move in step with the music and actually really establish the pacing and get them to move the way the director wanted them to move. It's such a good detail, and that's something that they did here with The Devil of Christmas, and it's so well done. It really is so well captured in that respect. But with this particular thing, it can be kind of in a way something that a lot of people might not get. Like, people might think that, oh, this is kind of a bit silly that they're doing this from the point of view of a 70s serial, when in reality they could have just played this story straight. But in a way, them playing it kind of as a homage really kind of helps to lull you into this sense of, this is just real campy fun. And you really do get that. I mean, there's this really wonderful sequence where they're eating dinner, and the director's going, "Oh, I hate doing food scenes," and then someone off camera to him, someone who's either with him, goes, why is that? And he goes, "Well, it's quite obvious. The food's cold. You've got to make sure that the actors, know their marks. You've got to make sure that, everything works very well. Child actors are the worst," and things like that. And it really does give you a lot of insight into how filmmaking works. Like, because they have to do multiple takes of various different things, sometimes they'll use the same plate of food over and over and over again to show in a particular shot. Sometimes it would take days to get one shot of a plate of food. So it really does give you that sense of so much time goes into these little intricate details. They're really only on the screen for about 5 seconds, and it's so well done. And what I really like is they kind of make fun of the classical, when in the Scooby-Doo cartoons, whenever Scooby would do something silly, the gang would always laugh, and they'd go, "Ho, ho, 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 ho," and they'd all start laughing together in unison. They kind of do a little bit of a riff on that, where Julian tells a joke, and him and Kathy are trying to eat their food, and they go ho 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 ho, and then they go, okay, pause, keep laughing, keep laughing, keep laughing, and they start laughing, and then all of a sudden they go cut on to next scene, and you can retell that it's got that sense like, how long do we have to keep laughing for, kind of thing. And it's really funny. Like, there's a lot of really great moments in this. Like, I love a scene, for example, where there's a scene where Kathy literally is worried for George's life, because it's established in the mythology that if you are a victim of Krampus, you don't just have to be bad. You have you have stages to Krampus. One of which is he leads you a stack of kindling into your boots. The first is he leaves a stack of kindling in your boots. I don't know I can't remember what it's actually called, but I think it's like these little reeds of thin sticks, thin bits of kindling in your boots, like in your snow boots. And the second is he leaves his mark on you. And the third is he takes you away. And throughout the course of the story, these little details come to pass. Let's say, for example, Rulalensky sees that. Sorry if I butcher that actress's name, last name. Sorry about that, but I think her name's Rulalensky. Rulalensky, the mother-in-law, discovers the kindling in George's boots. And she starts to get she starts to think it's very odd. She thinks it's very odd because she thinks, this is nothing. This is just such a weird and odd thing going on. And she brings it to her son's attention. He says, "Oh, it's going to be fine. We don't have to go anywhere." But the mother-in-law kind of just feels very, I don't really know about this. So I think we should, keep an eye out. And then the second time is when George has a cut, like a scratch mark on his chest, and Kathy just basically loses her shit. She goes absolutely insane, and she gets so carried away to the point where she's hysterical. And there's even a moment where Julian just slaps her. But it's kind of one of those very over-the-top theatrical slaps where you can tell that it's fake, and you can tell that there's even a moment where Julian goes to slap her, and you can tell it completely and utterly misses the mark, and the sound of the slap making contact, the hand making contact with her face, and his swashing, as it was, the swashing of his hand, are totally out of sync. And it's so funny. And he even just shouts, "Can't you see you're scaring the boy?" And then he goes, "Can we do that again, Julian? Can we do the slap again and the line again, please?" And he just shouts, "Can't you see you're scaring the boy? We're leaving." Things like that. Steve Pemberton is just really wonderful. And you can tell what he's trying to do with his performance as Julian. He's trying to basically play the Donald Sutherland role from Don't Look Now, where he's the guy. He even looks like Donald Sutherland did in the 70s, like in films like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Don't Look Now. You can really tell he has that kind of very 70s look, and he definitely gives you that feeling that he's the more grounded person. He's the one who thinks very logically and thinks, this can't happen. Ghosts and monsters aren't real. This is all just in our heads, or this is all just in Kathy's head. And he even asks her at one point to take her pills. And at first, there's this continuous thing where it's clear that she has some issues. So he asks her to take her pills, but then she grabs pills from her pocket and she basically flushes them down the drain. And at first you think it's, her going, "No, I'm not taking my pills. I'm not crazy. I know my mind. I'm not crazy." But then as the story goes on, you really begin to realise, there's more to this than meets the eye. And it's really brilliantly done. Like, there's a lot of really campy moments in this episode, and the whole entire point of it is the behind the scenes stuff. But the story within the actual goofs is actually very compelling, and I really found myself really invested in the story as well. Like, I was wondering, where is this going to go? And then the big twist of the film happens. George and Rulalensky leave the cabin, and Julian and Kathy are left behind, and they're alone in this cabin one night, and they see what they think is a monster, like something in the shadows. And there's this really wonderful moment where the window crashes in one of the rooms, and snow's flying everywhere, which is just cut up bits of paper, really, that's kind of just fluttering at the screen through a fan. And Julian goes into the room and he tries to shut the window, but when he shuts the window and the sound is cut off, the fan turns off, and nothing moves. It's just kind of like, oh, he didn't even shut the window properly, or he didn't even shut the window, he was like miming it, so that the fan just stopped and everything like that. It's so well done. And there's this wonderful scene halfway through the film that's being filmed where Julian has to make it. The director says, Julian, we had to shoot this scene extra quickly because Julian's actor had to go away for a voiceover. So he's speeding up his lines like anyone's business. And the actress who plays Kathy has basically cottoned on to what he's doing. Like, he's trying to get out of this shoot very quickly. So she deliberately slows her lines down just to piss him off. And it's such a funny scene. There's so many great moments in this. But yeah, this episode is pretty fun. I think if you are interested in watching a fun, campy episode with a lot of great goofs, a lot of great performances, but also a lot of great details about how these particular films and TV shows are made, I would highly recommend giving this episode a watch. And I definitely do think the episode is much more interesting to watch on repeat viewings, because you do notice little details that the director's commentary highlights in the episode, that's very well established. Like, say for example, the director, who is played by Derek Jacobi, he says the part about Kathy being pregnant was my idea. That was actually a last minute inclusion on my part, to tell you that there's something wrong going on inside of her. And that's actually a very interesting thing to play with. Like, did he knowingly, cast this actress for various different reasons, or was there actually a much deeper story behind why he wanted the character to be pregnant in the first place? Was the actress pregnant who played Kathy? Like, what was the actual idea? And it actually makes it a lot more sinister when you actually get into the twist of this episode. And there's actually two twists in this episode. There's a twist of the film within the show, and then there's the twist that happens in the production. But in order to get into that detail, I'm going to have to say massive spoilers for The Devil of Christmas. So if you are a fan of the Inside Number 9, but you somehow haven't watched this episode, please pause the video, go and watch it, enjoy it, and then come back and let's talk. But for those of you who have seen the episode of Inside Number 9, The Devil of Christmas, the finale kind of has a very interesting twist where the film ends with Julian seeing Krampus. Krampus grabs hold of Kathy, and it's a very cheap-looking Krampus. He isn't like the sort of Krampus that makes you think, oh, he's not like the one in the 2015 film, where he's very big and imposing and intimidating. You can clearly tell it's a guy in a suit. But yeah, it really is funny in how goofy it looks. Like, the mask doesn't look convincing at all. It looks very goofy. But then he grabs Kathy, and just as Julian is about to whack him with a poker, he succumbs to a heart attack, and it's revealed that Kathy was in cahoots with Reece Shearsmith's character, whose name is Carl. And when she was throwing away the pills in the sink, it wasn't her pills, her medication. It was in fact her husband's pills for his heart condition that she threw down the drain, so that when it eventually, is revealed that he is dying, it has that revelation that, he's going to die because she got rid of his pills. And it's a very dark twist, because for the longest time you are literally on Kathy's side. You literally are thinking to yourself, oh, she just feels completely vulnerable and she feels like she's going crazy, like what's going on in this house, what's going on in this cabin. what's going to happen to this poor woman who's pregnant and has to, you know, deal with being the outsider in this family and all these other things. And for the longest time, you're on her side. But then when you find out that she did, in fact, you know, do all this so she could fool her husband and literally scare him to death, it really does add a whole entire other layer to her intentions. And it really kind of makes her out to be obviously a not very nice person. But then when the director yells cut, there's one final scene to shoot. And Kathy is drinking champagne and she's drinking it with Carl, and they're very happy. They're about to, you know, seal their romantic, you know, endeavour by, you know, engaging in a little bit of honeymooning, shall we say. And he gets these chains, wraps her to the bedpost, and she goes, oh, I can think of us going somewhere like, you know, Thailand or Turkey. We can go anywhere we want to. We have all the money in the world. We're successful. We're brilliant. We're together. We're in love. What do you think, Carl? And then Reece Shearsmith brilliantly does this very campy performance where he goes, in his fake, you know, Krampus outfit, who is Carl? I am Krampus. And then he just has his claws out and he's like going, hoo-ha, hoo-ha, and he just starts laughing maniacally and he leers deeper onto her. And she's like going, no, no, no. And the director goes, cut, on to next scene. And I loved that ending. That was such a Tales from the Crypt ending where she just starts screaming and she's like doing this very campy over the top, going like, no, no. And it's really fun. It's really fun. It's a bit campy, but it's fun. It was a good twist. And then the director yells cut. And then Carl's actor starts to leave the set. He shakes hands with the director and he says, it's nice working with you, goodbye. And he goes, oh, next scene, get the other actors in. And then everything seems fine. And then it turns out that, oh, she's not being removed from her chains. Oh no, there is a plastic sheet coming out and being placed beneath her. Oh no, there is a scene where a guy played by a different actor adorning the Krampus outfit. And he's talking to the director off camera, and we just get a little shot of him, you know, looking at her, at Kathy, very sinister-like. And she's like going, oh, I didn't get any script pages for this scene. What's going on here? I don't know anything about this scene. And then you're going like, oh shit. And then the guy comes in with the mask and he's got a great big bloody machete. Not a literal bloody machete, but he's got a literally huge machete. And he just runs up to her and her mouth is gagged so she can't scream, she can't bite down, she can't do anything. Her mouth is literally, you know, been reduced immobile through this gag. And it's horrendous. It's awful because it ends in a way where she's screaming her head off and the man with the machete in the Krampus outfit just comes onto the bed, raises up the machete, and then it just cuts. And then the final line is the director says, oh, that happened. You can't do it now these days. I could say it's one of the best ones. But then, what else would you really call it? And then you hear the other person say, police interview terminated at 9:15 p.m. So the entire time, we have been watching a snuff film. And this episode, when I first watched it, that ending left me with my jaw dropped. I did not know that this episode was going to go, because it was so light-hearted for a good portion of it. It was such a fun, campy little horror movie. Like it looked like it was just going to be a fun, you know, little production video on the making of this very camp, you know, 70s horror film. But then when you get to that ending and you have that big reveal that it was actually, oh no, a snuff film, it really does throw you through a loop, and you really do end up thinking to yourself, oh my god, that literally was so chilling. And it was one of those endings that still leaves a shiver up my spine, even when people talk about it, either when I'm watching other video YouTubers like Unleash the Ghouls and Wheeling, all these other YouTubers who talk about Inside Number 9. Whenever I watch their reactions to it, I legitimately nod and think, I'm so glad someone feels the same way, because I felt the same way too. Like, I felt like this was such a fun ride to begin with, but when you get to that ending and you get to that horrible reveal that you're actually watching a snuff film, it was brilliantly done, because you don't expect it, and you really do kind of hope that it is going to end in a very fun, campy way, but it doesn't. It actually ends in a very grisly way, because you know that you've kind of partially witnessed a murder, and it really is a fantastic twist. It definitely is one of the ones that I definitely will say that if you are looking to get into Number 9, this is one of the ones that I would recommend you watch. But I would recommend watching the very first episode of Inside Number 9, Sardines, first, and then make your way through the episodes very, very slowly, and then get to the point where we're currently at, which is Wise Owl of Series 7, and now The Bones of St. Nicholas, which is coming in a week's time. So I really do feel like this episode is fantastic. It's probably one of my favourites to watch around the Christmas time, and it really is a fun episode. It definitely does have a lot of camp, but it has a lot of good stuff. It is fun and campy, but it doesn't feel like it just is that. It feels like Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith and all the people involved in this know exactly what they're doing with this episode, with the callbacks to classic 70s goofs and, you know, production fails, like the boom mic appearing overhead in shot and things like that, and people missing their mark, people flobbing their lines, characters, you know, laughing for long-winded periods of time, the slap sound effect and the actual motion of the slap being out of sync with the sound of the hand making contact with the skin. It really does add so much flavour and so much you know, a sense of fun and intrigue to what could otherwise just be a very straightforward episode about Krampus, and it really did a good job. And that's what I really like about this episode, is it's just a really fun episode, but it also has this underlying darkness on repeat viewings. In fact, this episode is even more brilliant the second time round, because you really do start to pay attention to what Derek Jacobi's character is saying in the overhead commentary. Like that idea about him saying, you know, it was my idea to make the character of Kathy pregnant. It really kind of adds a certain layer of sinister. It adds another sinister layer to this director's vision in a way. Like it basically confirms that he wanted this to be kind of like this perverted fantasy that he's created, and it really is a very dark episode. It's even more dark when you know where the episode is going, and it really just adds so much more flavour to the episode than what it would have otherwise been. And it really is incredible, but I would have loved to have seen the first draft of this episode, and I would have loved to have seen what they would have done if they'd done a straightforward Krampus story, because part of me likes to think that Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith are good writers, and they know how to tell these very engaging stories. But I think what's very interesting is I kind of don't want them to do another one on Krampus, because I feel like this one's just so perfect in the way it was pitched and then the way it was executed, that I couldn't ask for anything more. So if they do decide to do another Krampus story, I don't think they will, because their philosophy, whenever they do an episode or whenever they're doing a next one, they always say to themselves, what haven't we done? So that's something that I really do think is really wonderful. But what I really love about this episode is it's just such a great episode to watch, not just on repeat viewings, but also it's just such a great one to watch when you're literally in the cold, you're not going anywhere, it's snowing outside, and you have nowhere to go, but you really just want to just relax and just enjoy yourself, take a load off, get a cup of hot chocolate, and just sit in front of the telly, recline, like I have a little recliner in my living room, and just watch this episode and have fun. And that's what this is. This is the perfect example of a Christmas-themed episode, in the sense that it has that very nice campy variety to it, like a campy variety show. But then there's also a certain sense of there's also a certain sense of, lightheartedness, but then there's also a sense of mystery, and there's a sense of, melancholy, but then there's also a sense of just genuine chills to be had. And it really is a fantastic episode. I would highly recommend you watch this episode if you can, but I would recommend, if you're going to start inside number 9, start with series 1 and work your way all the way through. And I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment. What do you guys think about this episode? Did you think it was as good, or did you think it benefited as much from this very almost, behind the scenes, goofy production video as much? Or would you have been intrigued to see a very straight-edged Krampus episode? Let me hear your thoughts in the comments. And I hope you're all having a very good day. And if I don't see you before Christmas, happy Christmas to all of you, and all the best. Take care.